A couple of years ago, and I don't know if you're going to know in a few minutes more about what I do, but a couple of years ago, I had a lot of portraits I was presenting around the country of gold stars, 2 gold stars of their fallen heroes. That's what I've been doing for the last 21 years, is free portraits for all the families of the people who have died in the war. I've done 9,000 of them. In fact, let me put it this way. The country of Poland called me and they said, we haven't lost anybody since World War II, so we don't know how to handle the families of the fallen. We understand what you're doing in the United States. Would you do it for us? I said, what does that entail? He says, we'd like you to do portraits of all of the fallen heroes from Iraq and Afghanistan for the country of Poland for their families. My comment to them was under 2 conditions. And I said, one is the families pick out the photographs, and secondly, when they're presented to the families, it has to be done in a way that shows the respect for the sacrifice. They agreed. They, in turn, created a like Memorial Day, which is around Christmas, December every year in Poland. And they have a 3-day event where they actually presented my portraits to the families. It's an incredible video to watch. Then what they did is they called me and they said, could you get us a second set of those same portraits? I said, for what? They said, we're opening a museum in downtown Warsaw for fallen heroes, and the first thing people are going to see when they walk in the door are those other portraits of those fallen heroes from Iraq and Afghanistan. I was amazed that the country of Poland would ask me or didn't even know what we were doing. In 2019, I got a phone call from Poland, and they said, a general is coming to town. You need to make time for him. He's going to present you the Polish Armed Forces Medal. I said, you realize I'm a Marine, right? He said, yes. And he says, and we don't give a lot of Americans the Polish Armed Forces Medal, but we're sending our 2-star general to you to give it to you because you helped us take care of the families of the fallen, which is what I've been doing for a long time. Normally, when I send portraits around the country, actually I've done Great Britain and Canada is also, I shared the project. I do it by mail. If they're in the area, there's one right up here somewhere. Yeah. They're like that. This is Bonnie's husband. So those are the portraits that I do just like that. So when we can hand them to people, that's what we do. But a couple of years ago, I had just a mouthful of these portraits. They had to go around the country. And Tennis was at my house. Tennis is a Marine, good friend of mine, Vietnam era. He said, why don't I deliver those? I said, my foundation doesn't have the financing, I was serious about it, to pay you to do that. He says, no, he says, quote, God's been good to me. He says, I'll take care of that for you. So for 2 months, in April 2 years ago, he drove 13,272 miles around the country by himself and delivering in dress blues all of the portraits to families that I had to deliver. Ending with Woody Williams in West Virginia. Woody was the last living World War II Medal of Honor recipient, got it at Iwo Jima. And we actually got to do a Zoom, Woody and I did. I talked about Vietnam and he talked about Iwo Jima, and it was an incredible conversation. But Tennis took care of that. And I think it's an incredible thing that Tennis did. One of the things we did, Tennis, again, like I said, was doing it on his own. So what I did was he had lost his brother and it was important to him. What we did was I drew his brother's portrait like that and it rode in the back seat with Tennis for those 2 months. That's Tennis. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my project, if that's okay. Some of you have already heard it. Some of you probably haven't. Okay. This is Vincent Santinello. On March 28, 1968, Kamlo Regional Headquarters, just south of the DMZ in Vietnam, I held my friend Vincent as he died. We've been at the DMZ for most of my 67 and 68. I was coming home in 3 weeks. We went to a place that we were told was safer. It wasn't. We've got a lot of rockets. The Vietnamese, Viet Cong, decided that we were still their target, and they were going to come get us. What they usually do is they start with the rocket attack, and then they overwhelm you when you're in your holes. And you have to kind of guess when the rocket's going to stop, get out of your hole, or you're going to be dead. But we had a lot of patrols out for some reason around us at that time, and so they didn't get to come as fast as they wanted to, the bad guys. I saw a friend of mine, Peter Armstrong, who had been hit by shrapnel in a rocket. We ran to him, my corpsman and I, John Nunn, and did what we could do. He was already dead. But then I noticed Vinny was laying there, not dead, and hurt badly. So we ran to him. I took him in my arms. My two corpsmen, John Nunn, Tony Milazzo, did everything they could possibly do to keep Vinny alive. It wasn't going to succeed, and we all knew that. We were all young kids, but we knew enough of what was going on. But the last thing Vinny did is he looked up at me and he says, "Mike, I just want to go home." And he closed his eyes and went home. When I got back from Vietnam, I went to art school, became the artist for the Seahawks, for the Huskies. Are there any Cougars in the room? Okay. National championship football for the University of Washington with my name. Just one year. But Vinny changed my life that day. He gave me something as a 19-year-old kid I wasn't aware of for about another 35 years until I received a phone call one day. And it was from a young woman, Sharice Johnson, who had just seen me on television. What had happened is Evening Magazine had done a piece on my celebrity portraits that I've been using for fundraising around the country. I guess we raised about $10 million. Thank you, by the way, for that. And they wanted to do a story. John Curley called me up and said, "Let's do the story." And we did it. And during the story was a 7-hour interview for a 5-minute piece. I made this announcement. I used to have a studio down in Edmonds right underneath Arnie's restaurant. That's where we were doing this interview. I said, "You know, I've drawn 6 presidents, a pope, and 137 Playboy playmates." And I'm really proud of all of this. And the guy said, he says, "I guess that about does it all." And I said, "I think so." The interview ended. I say this not in a joking manner. If I'd have known that, I would have said that comment about 5 hours earlier. You know? But if you've been interviewed for TV, you know it takes a lot of time. But anyway, NBC picked it up because of that Playboy comment that sent it around the country. I received a message from a woman one day, Sharice Johnson. She lived in Boise, Idaho. She said, "I just saw you on television," and she said, "How much would you charge me to draw my husband?" That's all she said. And I thought to myself, this is going to be really good. I just got national exposure for my portraits. I am very good at this. So this is going to be the first step in millions of dollars. Then she said, he was a corpsman and he died in Iraq in 2003. With that, my whole life changed. Corpsmen were the bravest people Marines know. If you're in combat, corpsmen save all of our lives. And my corpsman did. And I said, "I can't possibly charge you." Her husband's name was Michael. I said, "I can't possibly charge you. Just send me his photograph." I did his portrait. Something happened inside of me. I thought of Vinny. All kinds of strange things were going on. And I sent this portrait out. I have to take my hat off for this next piece. So about 2 days later, my wife and I were driving me up to Silver Lake to get a haircut. That's why I took my hat off. She was driving and she handed me the telephone, and on the telephone was Sharice Johnson. She called and she said, "I called to say thank you." And I didn't know why, because I don't expect thank yous. In fact, awards like this are kind of amazing to me because this isn't what I do it for. She said, "I got the picture yesterday of my husband. When I pulled it out of the packaging, I looked into his eyes." She says, "I reconnected with him instantly. And for 2 hours, we talked about everything we couldn't finish because he was dead." She said, then at the end of the conversation, I said, "I love you." And I felt him say, "I love you back," and that I'm okay. She said, "So I'm calling you to say thank you." Now I'm figuring that's because she got the picture right. And I said, why? And she says, not because I have the picture, but because in the year that my husband's been dead, I haven't slept a full night's through, not one since then. We talked about everything, she said. But she said, I'm calling to say thank you. She said, because last night is the first night in a year I've slept all night. She and I talked for 20 minutes, so of course there's a lot of more things I can't share, wouldn't, because it's very personal stuff. But Michael Johnson was portrait number 1. And I told my wife, now we need to do them all. She said, how are we going to do that? Well, I said, well, I've been doing celebrity portraits forever. I was the Cirque Dinner Theater portrait down in Seattle for years. And so I've been doing portraits a lot, for the Seahawks and the Huskies, et cetera, Mariners. She says, how are we going to pay for it? I said, I'm turning that over to God because I'm not going to be concerned about the money. We're going to do the project. That was 21 years ago, and now I've drawn 9,000 portraits. This is the most important thing I've ever done in my life. I had a Gold Star dad call me one day, 1 year after he received a portrait he had with his son who died in Iraq. He reminded me he was a Marine also in Vietnam. And he said, you know what you're getting out of doing this? And I said, nothing, I do them for free. No, you know what you're getting out of doing this? And we went back and forth until he had me really pissed off. And he said, are you angry yet? And I said, yes. And he said, good, then you're going to hear what I'm about to say. He said, remember me? He said, I'm also like you. I'm a Vietnam combat veteran. Marine. He said, your soul got to come home from Vietnam. Second he said it, I went from sitting to standing to back to sitting, and a chill went up my back. And I honestly came home from Vietnam figuring I had all the parts that I went over there with, but I had left one behind, and now I was home. I want to share one other story with you. By the way, this project also helps first responders. Support 7, I'm a big proponent of Support 7. In fact, the young lady that was just killed at the mall here a few weeks ago, July 3rd, before 48 hours was up, her parents had their portrait of her on the wall. Oh. And I had an email, instantly, from the mother, and she says, your portrait brought us peace. Can you imagine that? That's why I do this work. Because there's people across this country who are hurting, now almost across the world, a lot, and we help them. I want to tell you a story about one. This is Edward. I received a call from a young woman in Denver, Colorado. And she said, I need you to draw a picture of my husband and my 2 girls. He was Special Forces, Iraq. Now, because I include suicides in my project, because I'm a combat guy, and suicides are war deaths, as far as I'm concerned, I said, can you tell me more about your husband? She said, well, he didn't die in the war, and he's not a suicide, but he had just gotten back. We had bought a home in Denver. One night we were all sleeping. Girls were downstairs, we were upstairs, and the house caught on fire. She said, we jumped out the window upstairs. I ran to the neighbor to get 911. My husband ran back in the house to get the girls. She said, can you put the ladybug in the drawing? She said, because they found the bodies of my husband and his 2 little girls together in the house. I don't say these stories for shock value, but I want you to understand what I do every day. And it's changed my life. So I don't do any of this for awards. I do appreciate being allowed to stand up here and talk about it. I put a little deal out on my Facebook page a couple of days ago about this award. And I've had 272 people comment, all gold stars, that the most important part of my morning today, once they congratulated me on receiving this award from you, is I get to talk about them. I can't possibly talk to you about everybody that I worked with, that tennis has met and worked with. But just know that this last story I told you is indicative of the stories we get all the time. One last piece. I got a call one time from a woman in Great Britain The English government, Great Britain's government called me and they said, could you do this for us? And I said, yes. And they said, what do you need? I said, can you send some letters out to the families letting them know I'm not a scam. I'm not going to try and steal money from them. I'm trying to do something free. And I'm a quality artist. So they did that. And I got a call from a woman in Great Britain, middle of the night. She said, why does an American want to do anything free for a Brit? And she wasn't making money. So I took my breath away a little bit and I stopped for a minute and I said, first of all, it's not an American doing something free for a Brit. It's a combat veteran offering something free to the family of a fellow combat veteran who didn't get to come home. Then she said to me, she said, now I understand and you can draw my daughter. And I drew her daughter, who was the first portrait I did from the soldier that fell from Great Britain. About 3 weeks later, I was asked to do a radio show in London, drive time. And the guy on the radio said, I have no idea what to ask this mother. I said, why don't you just ask her about her daughter? We'll just talk about her daughter for an hour. That's the most important part of this whole radio conversation. And that's all we did. But it brought me a lot of the people who have died from Great Britain. You know, it's not about politics. Obviously, being a combat veteran, having my friends die, I walk every day in this area with carrying the flag, and I get people stop me all the time wanting to know why I'm carrying the flag every day. It has nothing to do with politics. A lot of my friends came home from Vietnam under the flag. A lot of my friends didn't come home under the flag. They couldn't be found. I walk for them. When people see me, last night I walked and these two women came up to me and it was so funny. She said, my son loves you. I didn't know what to say. She said, he's 24 years old. He knows why you carry the flag and he loves you. He wants to meet you. And I have this great coin that Tennis got made for me by Woody's people. My own coin, which is really unique. And I had one in my pocket and I gave it to her and I said, give it to him the way I'm handing it to you and just tell him thank you for caring. So the reason I'm standing here right now is to thank all of you for caring. If you want to find out more about this project, I'm here to ask. You can ask questions right now if you want to. But fallenheroesportraits.com, .org, right? fallenheroesportraits.org. It has all kinds of videos and other stories that are out there. So there's a book out about the Vincent Sentinel part in Vietnam, Letters from Hell by Ralph Morales. I recommend anybody to get it, except it's a hard read. Chapters, 15 through 18? You're not reading a book. You're standing next to me during the whole thing. I wrote the forward to the book. In the book, my nickname was Red. Don't ask me where it was at back then. But I was all red hair back then. And it's so difficult to read. I lived it, and I have a hard time reading it. I try to read it, because I have those memories all the time. Vinny. This is Vinny. See, he's read the book. But Letters from Hell by Ralph Morales, I recommend it. If you want to really know what we feel like, right? Because this is the stuff that people like me have carried around our whole life. Fortunately for me, and I believe this, God has given me the ability to exercise some of the things inside of me in a way that helps other people. And those people I've chosen are Gold Star families. And when you get a Gold Star mother who lost their son, or lost their husband, or lost their daughter, etc., hugging you after receiving their portrait, you've never had that kind of a hug, unless your grandparent and your grandchild hugged you. To show you how we live, veterans. And I know there's some in this room. So I was walking last night. You know, it's not supposed to rain till 8 o'clock. You guys follow your radio. So I figured I'll walk from 5 to 7. I'll be good. I walk from my house and up from Perryville down into Edmonds. Of course, about 6:30 it started pouring. I'm thinking there's nowhere for me to go but to keep walking. By the time my wife picks me up down at the vet plaza or somewhere down in Edmonds, I'm soaked. But I got an interesting thought. It got dark, started raining, and I was thrown back to Vietnam. When in Vietnam, every other day, we'd have to take an ambush out at dusk. You're shaking your head. We'd take an ambush out at dusk where we would walk outside our perimeter into the jungle somewhere, 2,000 or 3,000 meters, and set up an ambush hoping to find the Viet Cong in the rain. And all I could think about last night was how that would be so wet, and we had to be so quiet, and we'd have to find places that was like, imagine the next time it pours rain, we'd have to find a place to sit for 6 or 7 hours just waiting for the enemy. And it was funny that this just came up to me like that when I was walking last night. But what my walks do is my walks will let me communicate with all of my friends who didn't come home. I know I keep saying this, but I have to mention his name. My friend Doc John Nunn, who I love, still love, called me on the 19th of December this past year, and he says, Mike, I've had too much Vietnam. I said, John, I was standing next to you. What are you talking about? I could tell where this was going. He said, I've had too much Vietnam. He said, I want to be with our friends. And I said, what is he saying, John? He says, I'm calling you to say because tomorrow, he says, I will be. He lived in Albuquerque, right to life state. He had arranged it. He says, I don't want to die in my house all alone and have nobody find me. He said, so I've set it up with the people that love me that are down here. And he says, I'm just calling you to say goodbye. When you meet a Vietnam vet, and I'm just, all vets, you want to take care of all vets. But I'm talking about Vietnam vets because that's me. When you meet a Vietnam vet who tells you they've been in combat, they're carrying a lot of baggage. And the only thing you can do is to care. And when you look at a vet and you say, thank you for your service, that touches a nerve. When you look at a vet and say, welcome home, that touches a soul. Just something you might want to remember. Thank you. That's it.